Everyone who's here is, who's going to be here is here, so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so welcome everybody to the August meeting of the Union Township Planning Commission, and we'll have roll call, please.
Albrecht.
Here.
Buckley excused. Gross.
Here.
LaBelle is excused. Lapp.
Here.
McDonald. Here. Shingles.
Here.
Thering.
Here.
All right. We have a quorum.
Okay, did you call me? I
Oh,
didn't.
Squadrito. I'm sorry.
I mean, I'm obviously here, but I didn't hear it, so I didn't say here, but I'm here.
Somebody called the meeting to order.
I know,
Who was
but
it?
Gotta be in the attendance.
That's right.
All right, so thank you. We have a quorum, so we will proceed. Next item is approval of tonight's agenda. We really just have, well, we have some reports and so on, but we really just have one business item, which is a continuation of the discussion of the framework for updating the master plan. Are there any other items that anyone's aware of that needs to be on tonight's agenda?
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
So motion was by Thering to approve the agenda, and second by Lapp, I guess. I think they were both at the same time. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so agenda's approved. Next item is, we last met on July 18th, so approval of the July 18th minutes, which were in your packet. So are there any corrections to or issues with the July 18th minutes?
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
Support.
So motion was by Thering to approve the July 18th minutes as submitted. Second was by Gross. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the minutes are approved. Next item is correspondence, board reports, and presentations. First item is Commissioner Thering, updates from Board of Trustees.
I do not have anything to present this evening. Updates.
You're just empty-handed.
Empty-handed.
Okay. Any questions for Commissioner Thering on Board of Trustees related issues?
I thought maybe Commissioner Thering could give us a run-through, demonstrate how that new fitness
Well,
thing works.
let's go. Come on down. Come on. Get the camera and let's go, guys. You ready?
Is it open to the public?
Yes.
I think it's
Okay.
I think it's
The sidewalks look pretty sharp.
They
too.
are very sharp. I've actually, because I live just down the road, that's my eye every time I drive by to see people. And I have seen people, to me, that look like they were actively using it. So it's new, so hopefully it grows.
Okay. Anything else from Board of Trustees? Okay. So Commissioner Buckley's not here, and I don't think the ZBA has met again since last month. So I guess we'll skip that unless you have anything to tell us. Okay. So we'll bring that back next month. The next item, item C, you have in your packet a community and economic development monthly report. I gather that's from Rodney and or Peter, and it's a summary of I guess all the matters that have come through you all. Is there anything, Peter, is there anything you want to say about this in Rodney's absence, Peter and or Mark?
Nope, it's just, as you pointed out, a collection of activity in our department.
Is this partly in, I mean, how long, have you always done this, or is this a new thing?
If I may, Chair.
Yeah, please.
I have each of the departments produce a monthly report for my benefit,
Mhm.
and then I take that information and compile it and massage it a bit into a monthly report that I provide to the Board of Trustees.
Mm.
And Rodney mentioned that maybe a meeting or two ago, he started including his department's monthly report in your agenda packet, just for maybe situational awareness, or
Mhm.
because a lot of what he does involves the planning commission, either before something might come to you or afterwards, or,
Right.
and he thought that he had heard positive feedback in terms of being interested in seeing what was in it, so he's continued. Maybe this is the second month, and unless you don't want it in there, my sense is he's going to continue to provide it.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think
thought
it
it
is.
was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, it addresses questions that had come up in previous planning commission meetings, just about, you know, how many potential projects are, you know, about contacts and, you know, how much is out there and so on. So I do assume that people will find it of interest, so.
If you ever wondered what was going on in these four walls, that's
Yeah, it's quite a lot, actually.
it's quite a lot, and that's not everything. So
Mhm. Okay. Any questions from commissioners on anything in that report? Otherwise, just consider it for your information, and, you know, we can discuss it anytime people have questions or concerns. Are there any other reports that anyone has that needs to come before us tonight? And then the last one is, you have the link that was in the agenda to the video. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. I should have, but I will. A YouTube video with the tiny homes report. So that was an actual presentation that you had at a.
it was. I guess maybe I should have said something about that. If you're interested in hearing the presentation, it's not last week's meeting. It's the meeting before, I believe, where I have her name. A lady came in and talked about that in detail. I couldn't do it justice. It's not very long, but it's very interesting, and it's very purposeful, I believe. So
Mhm.
it's helping. It's not a long-term solution, as I understood it. It's more of to help people get established and have an address, many things that you need to get a job, and other things too, you know. And then at some point in time, you will transition out into somewhere else and allow someone else to come in. So it was a really neat presentation. It's worth the few minutes to take a peek at it.
I can speak to it just a little bit because I'm on the board of directors for the Isabella County Restoration House, and it's quite different, but it's a kind of a partner organization. So the Restoration House is very temporary, like emergency housing for immediate situations, and then the tiny house is supposed to kind of be the next step, and then independence and, you know, being employed and having, you know, the resources that you need would be the final step after that. So kind of a tiered program in the community.
Very good. Yeah, I mean, it's relevant because, you know, we're talking about plans for housing and other aspects in our master plan, so. Is the restoration house the one that was moving from church to church?
Yes,
Did
right
it,
now
is
we're
that still the model, or did they ever find a permanent?
Currently, we are still rotational, but we just received a huge donation, really significant, last year, and we are looking to purchase property to make that a permanent shelter from now on. So it's gonna take a little while, and that's kind of a step-by-step process as well, but that's what we're looking at. It's
Nice.
no longer being seasonal and also being in a permanent building.
Very good. Okay. Any other comments or questions on the housing piece of that, the correspondence? Okay. All right. So, next item is public comment. So towards the beginning of our meetings, we have a public comment that's for items that are not on tonight's agenda. So if there's anyone who would like to address the planning commission on any item that's not on tonight's agenda, they're invited to do so at this time. We just ask you to come to the microphone, give us your name and address for the minutes, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. We also have the online option, but do we have anybody?
There's nobody online.
Okay. We haven't had anyone yet. It'll happen sooner or later. We'll have somebody, but we haven't yet. So public comment is open at 7:11. And seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that back up. There'll be extended public comment later in the meeting. We don't have any new business that I'm aware of, so we'll bypass that. So the next item is other business, which takes us back to the master plan updates. This is in relation to the June memo from Rodney, which has been in the last few packets, including this one. And we first went through the framework for updating the master plan, and we discussed that. And then at the last meeting, we had, I think we got through that, and then we waded into the policy statements from the 2018 master plan. And we got through sections A through I. And so I'm working from my original copy, which the paging numbering is probably different on mine. It's page 8 of that document and page 60 of that packet. But it's item J, transportation plan, is the next one. And so what I think Rodney mostly did was call statements from our existing master plan and group them in the categories that matched the categories that were laid out in the framework document. So we're up to item J, transportation plan, and there's a series of bullet points. And again, it's just commentary. Are they still relevant? Should these remain points of attention for the update? Does anything need to be changed? Does anything need to be added? Those types of questions. So is everybody with me on where we are? Okay. So under transportation, we've got 4 bullets and then some subheadings. The first, and these are the general ones for this whole piece. Transportation system needs to meet the needs of all types of users: motorists, pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit users. It's been an ongoing theme around here for quite a while. Next one is connections between neighborhoods and nearby activity nodes like schools, parks, and commercial nodes also contribute to the township's quality of life. As new developments and redevelopment occurs, opportunities to construct sidewalks should be pursued, especially in close proximity to schools, parks, and activity nodes and along major thoroughfares. Again, something that's been a guiding principle for a while. Next one is work with the road commission to incorporate non-motorized facilities into road improvement projects. And then the last one in that group is require cross-access and shared access for driveways in commercial districts. So any comments on those? Again, anything that doesn't belong, anything missing from that, you know, modifications.
I have a thought. Obviously, starting last spring, we now have a overrun of electric scooters now that are part of our transportation plan, and those, I don't know if there's a lot that's governing those things, and my concern is our students are gonna be coming back soon. We now have 2 companies that are doing that. We just had a second was just added, and so that's probably gonna increase the use of those, and when we start talking about bicyclists, I think scooters don't fall under category of bicyclists. They're their own category. Probably needs to be addressed because it's probably only going to increase. I don't see it decreasing anytime soon, so just something worth noting.
I think Commissioner Shingles brings up an excellent point. Just watching how things happen with the scooters on the sidewalks. And, you know, as you're pulling out, like onto Mission, the scooter will come down and, you know, they're coming fast. And, you know, something bad's gonna happen, you know, when they're on the sidewalks. And I think they get up, I don't know, they're 20 mile an hour.
They can get up to 30.
You know, there's one, I'll be in Panera occasionally in the morning, and there's a couple that go down through there, and there's people pulling in and out of that driveway. And I think, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I think there's just it needs to be addressed, something. I'm not sure what that is, but.
And in the
it's a
current
safety
plan,
issue.
there's some geofencing that's taking place that's, that's slowing them down, not allowing them to be used in certain areas, but that doesn't mean people can't have personal use. I mean, they can buy them themselves. I mean, they're available on the market, so I think it's just something that's gotta be addressed. I see us having some challenges here over the next week, because I don't know if it's ordinanced and governed well in terms of traffic laws and all of those types of things. And the city worked with the university for the ones that we have on campus, and thus the geofencing and some of those things, but it's just something worth noting. And I think we need to be preparing that in any planning that we're doing. Because it's gonna be a mode of transportation, we know. I'm not suggesting we have skateboards yet, but
Yeah. Well, so these, as I understand it, they have motors in them. They're battery powered. So they're not non-motorized, right? I guess what I'm wondering is, has anybody given them a name in all these discussions?
I don't know. I think we need to investigate that so that whatever we decide to put in our plan is consistent with whatever the nomenclature is for
Yeah.
those devices, because they're electric scooters. People call them all kinds of things, so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I made a note about it. So I guess, go ahead.
If you'd like a little background on that topic, be happy to give it to you.
Yeah, sure.
Right now, they're allowed in the city of Mount Pleasant. There's an ordinance that allows scooters within a certain framework. I don't think they're allowed on Mission, but we all know what
They're on the
that
sidewalks
means.
on
Yeah. There are speed limits. There's other regulations in the city ordinance. The ordinance also addresses the companies that come in for the shared scooters. There's also, and I'll use the term ordinance, I don't know if that's technically correct, but Central Michigan University adopted what I'll call an ordinance that governs how those scooters operate
Policy.
within the
Yeah.
grounds of the university. To date, there is no ordinance that allows those to be operated in the township. We've had some discussions with city and CMU over the last several years, I'll say, and with the companies as well. We have not got to a place where we've finalized or even gone very far down that road. So for right now, the vendors are using the GPS functionality within those scooters to what they just call geofence. So at the boundaries between the city and the township, the scooters are programmed so they stop working once they cross the corporate limit. And so that's the status in the township right now. There's been nothing brought to the Board of Trustees regarding those. I kind of wanted to sit back and wait to see what happened with these things before we took much of any steps to allow them in the township. So right now they're not. Planning Commission, it's right in your wheelhouse. If your master plan, if the Planning Commission has an opinion, positive or negative, you might, you're free to state that. You can leave it alone. But the point, they are here within a piece of geography in central Isabella County. But right now, they don't operate in the township.
Okay. Any other comments on that? I mean, it does seem like they're here now in the community largely, and it sounds like they're, may be here for a while. And we certainly have the student housing in the township,
Right.
and back and forth to campus, and then there's Bluegrass and all that stuff. So
I have a quick question. So is the company that CMU uses the same as what
It's
those?
not.
They're not?
CMU does not have contractually with them. They're just a company that has them, and they're allowed, as Mark mentioned, in the city and on campus, but it's not a university-sponsored
Got you. Okay.
program at all. University is just allowing them on campus. It's mode of transportation for our students, and to Commissioner Squatrito's point, if they're in the city, if they're on campus, the majority of the off-campus students live in the township because of all of the housing inventory on Bluegrass and Isabella and Broomfield. And so it's coming. I think we just have to, simple logic says if it's on campus, if it's in the city, it's coming. And so we can get ahead of it by at least looking at what are other communities doing and their terminology of, because again, this is just about our master plan. It's not about an ordinance that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm just suggesting if we're doing this now, why wouldn't we fold it in? Because I had a chance in May to go to Israel. For every one motorcycle I saw 50 of these, with no regulation. Sidewalks, streets, no speed limit. That's not what we have in our community. There's certain guidelines and regulations that I would assume if the township ever took this on, we probably would duplicate exactly what the city and the university is doing in terms of speed and the geofencing that allows you to build perimeter, if you will, and not allow them in certain places. I haven't seen them on Mission Street yet, but I don't know if they're allowed.
They're not.
They're not, okay. And so obviously in that geofencing, you can, if they cross certain boundaries, they shut down. And if they get up to certain speeds, they shut down. So that's a good thing, but it's only as good as the technology. So again, just trying to think proactively.
Okay. Well, I made a note of it. I'm assuming Peter made a note of it. So, again, these are just ideas that we're putting in there for being addressed in the process. Hearing you describe that, I didn't know about the geo fencing until now, but it perhaps explains why I'm driving around the community, I guess Mount Pleasant, and you just see a scooter on the ground in a random location. And I never knew whether it was because, okay, that's where the person wanted to go, or maybe that's where it stopped working, or, I don't know, or they were too fast, or whatever.
And the answer to that is yes and yes. There's no, you don't have to put it in a rack, but
And there's a fee, there's an app with it, so I forget what the fee is, but
So much a minute, I think.
several, $3 a mile maybe, something like that,
Yeah,
that they have to pay to get the thing to fire up. And then if they don't put more money in, they're wanting to go further, it stops till they put more money in. And there is also called an on-site manager with each of the companies. I believe it's Spin and Bird. And one of the things they do at night is go around and pick up these stray scooters and relocate them back to the designated areas that exist to start the next day.
$1 to start and 39 cents a minute is the Bird one.
I let my nephews use my debit card to try it
Okay.
once, and then I got repeated calls from my banking thinking that it was a spam, or like it was a, and it did not turn out to be very cheap ride. Let's put it that way.
It's not a cheap ride.
It's pricier than I thought it would be.
Yeah,
too. My
it's-
son used it.
Yeah.
Nighttime is pretty,
Oh, yeah.
pretty dangerous. They have a little flashing at the wheelbase, but
yeah.
Yeah.
you don't, depending on where you are, you don't necessarily see the body.
well, and from just a understanding, we have not been able to really assess capacity. They just showed up in April. So students were leaving, and it was, April, from my lens, of working at CMU, it was a mess. They were all over campus, they were laying down, students were riding on sidewalks, there's no, now, everybody's coming back and we have a second vendor. That was just added. So we have black scooters, we have orange scooters. So you can, yeah. So, might just want to get ahead of it again.
Okay. So those were the, I guess, preamble bullet points, and then the rest of the transportation section is divided into two parts. Plan for roads and streets, and plan for non-motorized transportation. So the first part, number one, plan for roads and streets. There's A, B, C, D. Establish recommended future right-of-way widths and design preferences for primary road corridors in the township.
I just wanted to go backwards a little bit. What we were just talking about, the 4 bullet points of kind of the overview.
Yeah.
I just think something that might be missing is just a very deliberate statement about how would we want to make the statement. But disabled users, wheelchair users, I feel like that's missing on this document. And I also feel as someone who lives in Union Township with someone who uses a wheelchair full-time, that's something that we could definitely improve on.
Would adding,
I'm not sure if it would go in the non-motorized area or if it would be something we'd discuss putting in the
yeah.
top area.
Well, I was thinking in the very first bullet under transportation plan, if I don't know if you have a suggested terminology, but adding it yet another category of
Yeah,
you know.
maybe I can think about that or try to look up some language that would work for that. We could come back to it. Okay.
Anything else on those 4 or on that section? We can always come back to it if people think of other things. So again, roads and streets, the future right-of-way widths and design preferences for primary road corridors in the township. I guess the question here is, and I just kind of throw this out there, are we talking about kind of guidelines or aspirationals? I mean, right-of-way width sounds more like an ordinance sort of thing.
The road commission, by rule, owns essentially all the roads in the township by statute. And they don't have enough money to do everything that they need to do, and the people in the county, they cover the whole county, want done. They certainly don't have enough money to do what Union Township would like done with the roads. So the way we handle that is we become a partner from a funding perspective. And what we're talking about here, and I think what the existing master plan talks about, is we'd like to somehow create something for the road commission, and if you want to think of it in the extreme, if we're going to fund it or partially fund it, we want to have some input in design. You'll notice a lot of roads in the township, I think Lincoln was even one of them, the space to the right of the white line on the right side of the road is almost non-existent. That prevents bicycling from operating safely. They get intimidated, even though bicyclists have every right to the road as anybody else. And I spent a year just doing nothing but riding a bicycle. And you got to be really confident and get out in front of the traffic so they're forced to slow down. You may notice down Lincoln as you cross the bridge, get towards Broomfield, take a left up Broomfield, those shoulders are quite a bit wider. And we insisted on that as part of that project. And the agreement was, because road commissions historically are concerned about roads that are used by cars. Well, the transportation environment has evolved over the decades, and so we didn't call those bike lanes because they're not officially bike lanes. But by making that shoulder 3 feet wide instead of 3 inches, it accomplished what we wanted to do. And so we're trying to figure out a way to make that more prevalent when in discussions with the road commission. Bluegrass is a good example. Bluegrass went in, the road takes up all of the right-of-way. The road commission could have acquired additional right-of-way when they put that road in. By not having any additional right-of-way, it becomes very difficult for the public entity, the township, to put a sidewalk down there. Because we can't utilize any right-of-way that currently exists by the road commission. So we're forced to going into the private property owner and discussing at a parcel by parcel basis. Are you willing to help? You willing to give us an easement? Do you want compensation for the easement? You know, who maintains it? All that kind of stuff. So in this particular example where they talk about right-of-way widths, it's specifically getting to, let's keep some right-of-way so that we can put a sidewalk or a street light or a water line or sewer line. all the utilities right now are under the road at Bluegrass. That's what that's talking about.
Okay, well, that makes sense, and that actually, I mean, that definitely is an ongoing issue. So,
It's been for years.
makes sense for it to be there, I think. Any comments on that? All right. The next one in this section, allow for variations in road location based on existing development and natural elements which the township may wish to preserve. Then we've got accommodate operational features such as turn lanes at intersections and potential transit facilities. I think both of those kind of are, again, sort of a similar sort of thing. Do, you know, allow for options that might lead to a better system in the long run. The last one, though, is a little bit different, and we've had discussions about this in relation to projects that have come before us. The last one in this section is D, require transportation impact studies during development review to ensure walking, biking, and transit facilities are as safe and convenient as road facilities. I don't know if it's been it hasn't been exactly for that purpose, but we've had discussions about certain businesses in certain locations, whether there should be a transportation impact study or not. And I think I think it's fair to say that there's been a difference of opinion sometimes on the commission as to whether something like that was advisable or necessary or what have you. So.
So have any of the impacts, have any impact studies been conducted since 2018? Does anyone know?
I'm trying to remember if one of the projects came back with one. The last one I remember a question about was one of the new filling stations out on Pickard.
Yeah, it seems like it was one Pickard and Isabella.
I think so.
Did we wind up requiring that or not? I can't recall.
The one they're
Require
building right now?
a study? I don't
remember
think
we
so.
discussed it.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. But I thought that when they came back for final approval that they had done
They did
something.
it, yeah. They did it without our requirement, as I recall,
Yeah.
because I think they were trying to understand.
Was it something from MDOT?
No, I think the developer did it,
Oh, really?
as I recall, yeah. Because the commission had a lot of concerns about that
That
corner
intersection,
and
yeah.
its access.
and-
I didn't realize how big that property was until they cleared everything, and
Yeah.
I was like, they're gonna put a gas station there with all that. Now, you can see it now, but I don't think we got to the point of, we didn't have to require it, because they did it, I think, because they were trying to determine if that was a good location. And I guess the question is, do we want to require that for every project? Because some don't have many issues, that would be.
I guess that was kind of my point, that if it's not being utilized, that it would either need to be clarified so that it would be happening, or taken out if we don't think it needs to be there, because it seems like it's not doing its job the way the statement is right now, if no one's doing them anyway.
I don't think require maybe is there a better word than require. Because I think there are instances where it is important that we look at that, and like Stan said, there are other instances that it's really not.
Yeah. So maybe a word like consider, and then that can be the, we can look at it on a case by case, because if we say require, then can we not do it? But if we say
And
consider.
I think it's important for the board to remember, the master plan has a lot of policy statements under many categories: transportation, housing, et cetera, et cetera. Administratively, we're not able to effectuate all of those. If it's in a document, then we feel we have the freedom to try to effectuate it, whether it's required or whatever the outcome is. If the subject matter, and I think the wheelchairs is a good one, if the subject matter is silent within the master plan, then we're going to struggle to do anything in that area, because it's not part of the master plan, so why bother? So,
Does changing, consider requiring versus requiring impact your ability to act on that, or? are we
words right,
overthinking it?
like require may move it up on the list.
Okay,
Sort of like ordinance enforcement or, legal enforcement. The state police could put 100 people on 127 if they wanted to prioritize speeding. They do, and there's other statutes that nobody at all pays attention to.
My concern would be if we use a word like require, and then we don't follow our own standards of requiring, and something happens by virtue of the fact that we didn't require it, what risk do we have in terms of potentially putting the township or the staff or whomever at a potential risk of litigation because we said we require it, but then we say, nah, you don't have to do it. If we say consider it, then that would be case by case to determine the importance of doing it. Because in some instances, we would say a impact study, transportation impact study, has no relevance in this particular instance. Let's use the Pickard
And you've done, just what, going back, Phil, you've been here the whole time, the emphasis by the planning commission on sidewalks. You have policy statements, it's much more difficult. And the developer has to make a case, and it has to meet your policy guidelines to not put in sidewalks. Okay? And that's how the community has advanced that type of network in large measure. We spend our own money on it, taxpayer money. So, it's about to what degree do you want to reinforce non-motorized versus roads. Right now, you need, site plan review needs to be looked at by the IRIDE. Can the buses access and turn around? Fire department, can the equipment access, turn around? Road commission, have they permitted the driveway cut and other things that are on this site plan? So this is just, the statement is about, and I appreciate Mr. Shingle's point, the statement is about whether or not you want to continue emphasizing, maybe increase emphasis. It's a policy statement.
Yeah.
Well, require is definitive. The required provides no flexibility. Consider does. If you say require, there's no ifs, ands, and buts. What has to happen? No, what should happen. Not necessarily because we can arbitrarily say, nah, that's not what we should do. I just think a word like require paints us in a corner of we have to do that. If we somehow neglect our fiduciary responsibility in not requiring something that we said we're requiring, well, we probably better have a compelling reason for doing that, as opposed to if we say consider, it can elevate to require by virtue of the action of the commission. in
But we
terms-
require sidewalks, that's, I think, Mark's point, is that we require we already require sidewalks, but we give the opportunity to the developer to make a case for why in this particular site, they don't need to do sidewalks at this time.
Mhm.
So I think, is that what you were getting at?
I'm sorry.
Am I understanding what you were saying there?
Yeah, I think so.
As an analogy?
Yeah.
And I appreciate the point. I'm not going to argue what word you want to use.
Right.
You all are going to decide at the end of the day on that. You know, you start with, do you want any mention of consideration during a site plan review or development process for anything other than roads? And what kind of traffic is going to use that road?
If,
You're past that,
What
you
about
know.
something more like required transportation impact studies when appropriate?
if a business is going to be put on a corner, anywhere, it is required, like, if I'm understanding, it's required for I-RIDE and the, isn't it required for, as MDOT or the county road commission to make sure that wherever they go in and out of the road, so that's something that they do regardless. I mean, that is required.
You already do that.
Yep.
You make sure the I-RIDE bus can get into the apartment complex and turn around.
Is that, do you think that's what
This-
that's referencing?
But for instance, I doubt if there's anywhere in our ordinances, zoning or otherwise, that require a bus shelter to be placed for I-RIDE to come to and pick up. That's a transportation facility, the bus shelter. So, and you do require I-RIDE to sign off that they're okay, one of those 6 or 7 outside approvals, drain commission, road commission, I-RIDE, utilities, I'm missing a couple probably, fire, you know. But it only goes as far as, can we get in there and can we get out?
Right.
Is, in terms of the language that might be used in the master plan, it's still true, though, that the master plan, as far as the review of individual projects, the master plan is not legally binding. What it says in there, it's the zoning ordinance that's legally binding in terms of what the applicant is required to do.
Right.
So if this is a policy statement in the master plan, then it implies that you know, the township has decided to take steps to codify that in the zoning ordinance.
And until we do, doesn't amount to a hill of beans, right? Because you have your master plan, which is the high-level guide, if you will. But now you gotta figure out how to effectuate those ideals, those policy statements. How do you effectuate them? In your world, you effectuate them through the zoning code primarily.
So it's aspirational. This
Yes.
is what we like to do.
Yeah.
And then this is what we're actually doing.
And I can kind of see what you're saying, like, just to put it in kind of like a story that makes sense. You know, someone gets hurt, a child gets hurt or something, and it's found that it wasn't a safe situation, and then it comes back and they say, well, what kind of, you know, commission are you when you have this in your master plan and children were hurt because there wasn't an impact study done? But what you're saying is it's not legally binding because,
I'm not an
Until
attorney
it's
and I'm
re-
not
until it
getting
gets-
to that level.
right, but I think that's kind of the gist. of
Yeah,
it.
right.
This is more aspirational, like
And-
Jessica said.
And I think what's gonna come out of, say, tonight's meeting, just like the other meetings, Rodney's gonna sit back and review this meeting, understand that there was discussion on this very topic, which word, and he's gonna come back to you with something that acknowledges or continues to flesh out
Sure.
what's the right word.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, if it were me, I think probably I would finesse that to say that something along the lines of review of projects should take into account things like walking, biking, and other transit, and include, and, you know, including the use of things like, potentially use of things like studies and so on, but, unless there's a consensus on this group to require them for all projects, I don't know that I would necessarily go there. Okay. Do we have more, have we fleshed that out, or do we need to talk a little bit more about that? I mean, certainly jump in if there is. Okay, the non-motorized section's a little bit longer, and that word comes up again, require. But so, under non-motorized transportation, including sidewalks and pathways, we've got A through L, and the first two are require bike racks for certain new non-single-family developments, and promote installation of bike racks at key locations. And then B is require non-motorized connections between sidewalks and business entrances, transit stops, and neighborhoods. I certainly think those things are things that we have been encouraging. And I know we've seen bike racks on plans, we've seen those connections between the sidewalks and the businesses and so on. And again, those would get fleshed out through the site plan requirements in the zoning ordinance. Next one is work with the road commission to improve crosswalks. That one is a little vaguer. What does work with the road commission mean to you all? And when you say improve crosswalks, are we talking about making sure they're wheelchair friendly and all that stuff?
So working with the road commission on sidewalks is again, as Martin alluded to earlier, right-of-way authority. And so if we don't have a right-of-way available, it has to go on the owner's property itself.
Should we state that? If that's what our goal is to work with the commission to improve access through right-of-way? Should we state something to that effect as opposed to improve crosswalks? Improve crosswalks could be to ensure that lines are painted, to ensure that curbs are cut. I mean, it's so many different things that it can the goal is right-of-way. Maybe we should say, we could say something to the effect.
A good example, I think, that we're gonna end up dealing with sooner or later. The more development that occurs in that park over there, whether it's a fitness court or anything else, the more you're gonna get folks from that neighborhood back there wanting to use it. And it would make their life a lot easier if there was a crosswalk down Lincoln here, for instance, that was signaled. And I mean, most of you have probably been to Traverse City. You can press a button and they're not traffic lights, they're horizontal, and they begin to flash when somebody's there, so they know, that deal. Those kind of crosswalks in Lincoln Park or McDonald Park, if we start seeing a lot of people from that neighborhood coming over here to use the things that are going in, how do you get them there safely? and that falls under whatever wording you want to use, or whether or not crosswalks are important, all up to the planning commission. But I think that's why it's been in there. And the wording is, again, the wording has to do with emphasis, and it's going to have an impact on us administratively, depending on how and it's true with the Board of Trustees too. There's a governance policy document, you've all seen the ends. If it's not addressed in there, I don't pay any attention to it. I don't care who wants it done,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah. Well, since the right-of-way issue is dealt with under plans for roads and streets, and since this is the non-motorized, presuming, you know, pedestrian and non, you know, people not in vehicles, I guess I'm okay with, you know, the reference being just to the crosswalks. Let's see, the next one, use pavement markings to clearly indicate where pedestrian activity will occur. Vehicles must not be allowed to block these areas. Colored or decorative pavement treatments will bring greater visibility to crossings. Yeah. I mean, those markings are important, I think, on roads. Next one is maintain clear vision zones at intersections to increase visibility. Nobody's opposed to that, I think. It's important. Provide adequate lighting at intersections so pedestrians are safe at all hours. I mean, the lighting discussion that the township has had over the years has, I think, included not just intersections, but stretches of road where, you know, where there may be pedestrians. Consider restricting right turns on red at high-volume intersections, as most motorists fail to consider the pedestrian when turning. Next is include medians in the design of intersections, especially where a high volume of pedestrian activity is expected. Medians provide safer crosswalk options and refuges for pedestrians. Next is expand use of mid-block crossings, include overhead flashers, pavement markings, and signage to indicate non-signalized crossing points. Next is decrease street width at crossing points by installing sidewalk flares and curb extensions, medians, or raised islands to create a safe haven for pedestrians. Next one is lacking a verb, but I guess encourage flexibility in road design to allow for bike lanes, sidewalks, buffer strips between the curb and sidewalk, etc. And then last lastly, prioritize public sidewalks and pathways in areas where there are connectivity gaps first, and to connect schools, parks, and other public facilities. I think that's, again, something that's been a theme for a while. So anybody see any red flags there? Anything you disagree with? Anything that's missing that you can think of? A lot of them are kind of technical things related to the, roads and how people move across roads. I guess the only thing I would say is there's relatively little there on pathways, and I would actually welcome a totally separate one on there, just that, encourage the township to explore non-motorized pathways that are not on a street whenever possible, because I think that, and it's not possible everywhere, but where it is possible, I think it's great to be able to give people a way of moving that doesn't force them to share the road or set up a bike lane or whatever it might be. Any other thoughts on this section? Okay, well, that's the end of the policy statement document, because the last part K is zoning plan, which really is just the zoning ordinance. There isn't a separate thing there. So the last item from this packet is the survey. And so if you remember the discussion from last month, at that time, we thought that this was on a little bit faster track. And so people were asked to read over the survey and email their comments to Rodney. And but it turns out that it is going to be discussed, I guess, at an upcoming Board of Trustees meeting. So we can, in this setting, vet the survey and give our comments to the board through your comments here. Because I didn't know that was, until I knew that was happening, I did send Rodney an email with some comments, and he asked if I minded whether this got included in the agenda, and I said no, by all means include it. And James also sent a comment to Rodney, and so his email was also included. So you have some comments there. But we can just go through this again, kind of piece by piece, and really just asking, does this look good? Are there any things you would add, or anything that doesn't seem, seem appropriate, or anything that you would want to see included that would give particularly useful information for the master planning process.
May I, Chair?
Yeah, please.
As I understand it, and you would probably know better than me, the Planning Commission is helping spearhead the update to the Recreation Master Plan. Okay. And it's my understanding that the questions in the survey that had to do with recreation have been discussed, and I think your input's included in an updated document. So it was my understanding that tonight you would focus on those areas in the survey that deal with land use.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's generally true.
Okay.
We spend a bit of time either earlier this year or maybe even last year, looking at the survey, the parts of a survey dealing with the recreation part, and we gave input. And yes, there's another document out there that Rodney has with revised stuff to that. So yeah, I wasn't planning on spending a lot of time, if any, on that. Maybe we don't need to spend a whole lot of time on the first part either, the rating of quality of township services. That's more, I think, for you all probably. Although the second piece deals with people's level of support for things like sidewalks and bike paths, and so on. And there may be things in there that, you know, may be relevant to add. One that I wanted to ask, and the fact that Stan's here is convenient, in that level of support part, it's actually, I think, in the second group, and particularly things that might involve a special assessment, development of a county-wide community swimming pool. So I guess I was under the impression from some discussion that took place at the all boards meeting that we had in the spring, that there's a whole a whole process or group in place that's working on that. So I guess, is that question needed at this point, or not?
No, because that's been vetted, thus the township has supported being a part of the Mid-Michigan Aquatic and Recreation Authority. We actually now have an authority that's created. I'm one of the representatives from this commission to serve on that authority, and we're moving it down the road and hoping to get it to ballot.
Okay.
So I don't think we need to revisit that in the middle of this planning. This planning process has been going on for a while, and I know Mark.
What the township has done is facilitated the ability for an aquatic authority to be created so that they can go out to the taxpayers through a vote and ask them to pay to build it. We have not opined at all on whether or not the township supports the actual building of it, but we certainly didn't want to get in the way of creating the path that question could be asked and answered. And there may be other reasons besides your purview that some questions may want to remain in here. You know, so I just say that so that, yes, we're looking for input, but some people get offended when you ask, and it's not, you know. So if this question remains in, I could see it remaining in for other reasons.
Okay, all right.
So it might be useful to get information to assess sort of community support in the township for the authority, even though it's already created. It would be a way still of getting, sort of testing the pulse of the community to see what kind of level of support you're seeing. Unless you think that's just redundant and would confuse people.
I think it's putting the horse behind the cart.
Okay.
I think at this point, this has been actualized as a authority. Mark just gave clarification to what the township has supported. The township has representation on this through citizenship and this commission. And that it's also been supported by Mount Pleasant School Board, as well as the City of Mount Pleasant. I have to remember who the third partner was in this. So it's moving forward. This is a living, breathing body that has governance and has met all the requirements of being an authority. So I think with that being said, I don't see this as redundant. I see it as after the fact in a lot of ways. To go back and ask when this is moving forward. It could cause more harm than good in a lot of ways. But I appreciate Mark's clarification of the township has not, the township did not get in the way of this. The support lies in the fact that the township has representation and has assisted with the creation of an authority to move forward to, because the ultimate approval is going to be a vote on people deciding, and
The township has fully supported creating an environment where the aquatic authority can put its best foot forward in asking the taxpayers what they want to do. We've done that for the last several years. We're continuing to do it. I go to the meetings, you know.
Okay.
I think this is more getting an idea of the, however many of the voters in the township, you know, will you be able to gain anything regarding their propensity to support it at the ballot?
All right. So as Mark pointed out, I mean, this is a multi-purpose survey, at least this current form, what we have in front of us, dealing with a lot of different issues. And so maybe what we can do, the most effective perhaps use of our time, would be to skip to page 4, the top of page 4, which is land use, because that's really what our kind of area of focus is, and it's going to be a significant part of how the master plan gets developed and written and so on. If you have any other comments on the earlier parts, you know, by all means pass them along. But in terms of things that we might, the portion of this that we have the most ownership of is this part. And so it lists, about 6 or 8 items and asks for the level of support. And so I think all of those are fine, but I don't know if anyone read my email, but I thought that there were some that were discussed in the other documents that we looked at, things that we are likely to be looking at in the future, but were not addressed in these. And I personally would be interested in seeing what sort of support these things would draw. And a couple of them would be renewable energy stuff, both the macro sorts of things like, you know, solar or wind farms, and also the individual things like in allowing people to have their own stuff in their, like a windmill in their backyard or something like that. Also, we've talked a lot about mixed-use development. You know, to what extent do people support this idea of mixed commercial residential type developments in the community? And then the one that we just talked about at the beginning of this meeting, different types of housing. You know, it's very easy to have these aspirational, you know, ideas about, you know, different types of housing to support different needs of people in the community. But then when you start to rezone stuff, are people supportive of that when it's going to be near them or even in their neighborhood and so on? So because these are things that are, you know, on the table for discussion, I'd like to put them out there and let people know, you know, that these are things that are potentially being discussed. So I would advocate adding all the things that I mentioned in here, but I'd also obviously open this to discussion from everybody in terms of what you would like to see added, or if you have any issues with, you know, the things that have been suggested or the things that are already here.
I think your suggestions pair well with some of the questions or statements that are already included here, to offer sort of a broader, to assess a broader range of responses in areas that we talk about on a regular basis here. Particularly the solar and wind, I think, and the renewable energies related to farmland, commercial development, housing, all of those things are really, that would be interesting to see how people respond to that.
Okay. Yeah, obviously you don't want the thing to get too long, but I thought it wouldn't be a problem to add 3 or 4 more into that section. The
Yeah,
other thing-
there are some limitations on how many pages you can have and
Mhm.
some of this kind of stuff that, but I appreciate your comments. Because I have input on this too. I think it's missing a whole section on the renewable energy, whatever you think about it, because we don't know what everybody else thinks.
Mm.
Solar, wind, fueling or electric recharging stations, you know. And there are groups around town that the township is part of that talks about renewable energy. So,
Mhm.
you know, maybe the last time this was done, it just was too far out in the future because I don't think there's much in here about renewable energy to
Mhm.
begin with, you know.
Yeah.
I think
It
it
needs
might be
something.
appropriate to have almost a whole section, you know, a series of questions on the renewable energy question, because you really do want to have people's input, because it can be interesting dynamics.
Does the general taxpayer want to pay to have a recharging station in the parking lot?
Yeah.
And if we do, why not a gas pump? You know, so they're important questions, and
Mm.
we'd love some input from the community on this whole subject matter, so.
Okay, good. The one that I don't know what caused me to think of this, but again, with land use, I don't know if you want to say anything about like gravel pit operations or anything like that.
I think there's enough in the existing ordinance to deal with that.
Okay.
That was part of my suggestion is instead of having a comment section at the very end, to have it after, just even if it's just a one-line comments after each section, because sometimes it's, I mean, how many, if this is this many pages and you get to the end and you had a thought about something, you may have, this is pretty in-depth. If you really get into this, you may let a thought go by. So just
Yeah.
like a one line afterwards, after each little section, that allows them to
Yeah.
jot something down.
Mm.
I think that's really useful, because sometimes you get new ideas that way too, that you wouldn't have seen otherwise, because
Right.
people they think about it right then, but
Right.
they don't carry that thought through to the very end of the survey.
Right, and having 6 or 7 questions in each section, and then an opportunity to write a thought down and then move on.
Yeah.
You don't feel like you have to go backwards to.
Yeah, we certainly, and if people do have other land use issues that are on their minds
Mhm.
that we haven't mentioned here, we certainly want to know about it. So, the other thing that occurred to me, and I don't know how easy this would be to do, it may be beyond how complicated you want to make the survey. I think the definitely support to definitely oppose that this ranking scheme, I mean, what I want to know is what, if there's anything in here that a majority of people would rank number 1. So I would like to see a ranking of these. And in addition to this, I'd like to see both. I'd like to see both the individual, rankings the way it is currently laid out, but I'd also like to see, each person, what are your top 3 or rank them all or something like that, just to see if there are certain things that, are really up there with the majority of people, or if it's more spread out than that. So, and if that's not possible, that's fine, but, because you can, like I said, you can you can get something by ranking based on these responses, but you can't distinguish between, like, if someone marks 3 or 4 definitely supports, you can't tell from that what their most important issue is. You look like you're gonna say something.
Well, I just my comment, I think, and I don't know, you know, sometimes you need to leave some of those things out to the professional survey people to build that survey and how they answer the questions.
Oh, yeah.
To get the response we really want.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I agree with what you're saying, but I also don't mind it like it is, how you rate it.
Yeah,
Because you kind of get a feel for, because, you know, sometimes you rate 1, 2, 3. Once they get past their 1, 2, 3, they don't care about the rest.
yeah. Yeah, no, I understand. It's ultimately gonna come down to the survey folks and, you know, their advice and, you know, what the board decides to do. I just threw that out there as something I would like to see. So, other comments on this section? Other items you think should be included? Is there anything in here about marijuana?
I don't
Businesses?
believe so.
Should there be? Are you interested in gauging public support for that sort of thing at this point, or is that kind
It's
of?
a big topic.
I mean, the city is full of them, but, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. Worth asking the question when the board reviews this survey.
Mm-hmm.
Because to date, the answer's been no, they're not interested.
Yeah,
Because we
yeah.
haven't adopted any ordinance to allow it.
Mm-hmm. Anything else on the survey? The last parts of it, again, the other sections I think are fairly general and deal with issues that are not specific to us.
And the portion that asks about frequency of use for information about local issues, I don't see social media listed on there. And I think, whether unfortunate or fortunate, a lot of people rely on local social media groups for information. And I see that we do ask in the second part, likelihood of use in the future, information provided through social media, but it's not in the top part. So that might be something to think about adding.
Yeah, that's a good idea. There's these, I know on Facebook there are several local groups.
There's neighborhood groups, there's
Yeah.
town groups, so, and whether misinformation or not, I think a lot of information is passed around that way.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
I guess in theory that would fall under word of mouth from others, but you would want to,
That's true.
I think you'd like to know, I think we'd like to know how many people are getting it from social media.
in keeping in mind that we don't have a social media
Right.
presence.
Mhm.
That also
So-
might be a discussion, you know, that might
Yeah.
activate a discussion about that in the future too.
Right,
because
but the
if-
survey
right.
question is, how often do you use the following methods? Well, we don't have a social media method.
Okay,
But you're not asking that, you're asking them how they, as residents, find out information about local issues.
right. That's how I took it anyway, unless that was not the.
Yeah, because the first two, newspaper and radio, are not yours either. Those are community resources. The rest of them are, well, except for word of mouth, but the others are township, you know, directly from the township in some way, but it's a mix of things that are and aren't.
And yes, we do need to do something a little more robust in that area. Chair, I walked through this with you, and I just wanted to let you know that there are a few ad hoc areas that I highlighted that I kind of thought might be brought up by the planning commission.
Hmm.
If you'd like me to run through those, just so you're aware they're here, you may or may not have anything to say about them.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
So if you go to the very first page of the survey, rate the quality of, 3 lines from the bottom, the zoning and building permit application process.
Hmm.
That may be fine as is. You may want to have something, but I just wanted to make you aware that that's kind of a land use related thing too.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And then on page 2 of the survey, the second half, please indicate the amount of effort that the township should direct to enforcement and limiting advertising signs, enhancing the appearance of building and roads.
Mhm.
That gets into your wheelhouse. Couple lines down, maintaining appropriate balance between the needs of business owners and the needs of residents.
Mhm.
4 or 5 lines down, reducing blight of business properties. So these are questions that were in the prior survey. Sometimes it's good just to have the same question so you can kind of track people's thinking is different. Other times you want to remove something that's not relevant anymore or add things like renewable that. And then the very last one on that page, establishing appropriate buffers between business and residential areas. So I just want you all to be aware that these questions will go out with the survey
Mhm.
unless we get some input that suggests differently. And then you spent a lot of time on the page 4. So I'm just paging through it. So those were my only items that I had highlighted prior to the meeting
Mhm.
that I didn't hear you talk about, so.
Yeah, no, I
Whatever
agree,
that's
I agree
worth.
that those are relevant to us.
If anybody has any input, say it now or send Rodney an email or something, or Phil, the chair, I don't know. I don't know how you operate, but, you know. Part of the survey also helps satisfy some, but not all, of the public participation components of updating the master plan.
Hmm.
Okay, so we can check a couple boxes along the way, you know. There'll be other public input opportunities, but this can count as one.
Hmm.
And the more you have, the better off you are.
Okay. So again, if things occur to you later, you can always communicate them to Rodney, and or me, whatever works best for you. So any other comments, questions, thoughts on the survey? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to declare that we've accomplished that task. And as Mark mentioned, the feedback will go back to Rodney and folks, and we'll percolate, and we'll receive our next, marching orders, or the next steps will be laid out once that has been properly digested and so on. So we're ready to move on to extended public comment. So as promised earlier, we have a portion of the meeting where individuals are invited to address the Planning Commission on any topic, whether it was on tonight's agenda or not. Once again, give us your name and address for the minutes, and please restrict your comments to 5 minutes, but on any issue. Extended public comments open at 8:31.
I have no one online.
Okay. Our online room is empty, and there are no audience members here tonight. So we'll go ahead and close back up the extended public comment until next time. Final item is final board comment. So if there are any comments from commissioners that you would like to make at this time, you're welcome to do so. And it is still light out. It's 8:32. It's still light out. It's not going to be that way for long, so enjoy that. If no one has any comments, we'll go ahead and say that we've completed our agenda for tonight, and so we'll stand in adjournment, and we will meet on the third Tuesday in September. I look forward to seeing everybody then.